The year was 496. The Frankish army of King Clovis and his allies faced the Alemanni near Zülpich. As the battle unfolded, the forces of the Frankish king were pushed back, suffering heavy losses under the blows of the Alemanni warriors. With tears in his eyes, King Clovis lifted his gaze towards heaven and spoke with a moved heart. "Jesus Christ, my wife, Chrodechild, proclaims that you are the Son of the living God. You bring help to the distressed, victory to those who place their hopes in you. Humbly, I beseech you for your mighty aid. If you grant me victory over my enemies now, and thus I come to know your power, then I will believe in you and be baptized in your name." After Clovis spoke these words, the hitherto victorious army of the Alemanni suddenly broke, their king being slain in the rout. Faced with their defeat, the Alemanni submitted to Clovis and begged for his mercy, which he granted. And, as he had promised, Clovis was baptized as a Christian, alongside 3,000 of his warriors. Thus, the bishop and chronicler Gregory of Tours, writing about 70 years after the Battle of Zülpich, summarizes the miraculous event that turned the staunch pagan Clovis into a pious follower of Christ. The act of Clovis's baptism would become decisive in making his kingdom the heir of Rome in Western Europe. In Gregory's depiction, the Franks were the people chosen by God to uphold divine order on earth and to carry forward the Christian mission. In this video, we will explore the historical truth behind this legend, telling the tale of how the founding peoples of medieval Europe were transformed from a pagan tribe into the Christian successors of the Roman Empire.
This video is sponsored by you. Unfortunately, the YouTube environment is not great right now, with the algorithm being friendlier to drama and react channels and YouTube being permissive of AI slop. We don't do drama and we don't do AI, but thanks to our members and patrons, our channel continues to make 3 public videos per week, with the team intact and going strong. In recognition of their generosity and contributions, members and patrons receive 2 additional exclusive videos each week, and access many other perks. Join them to watch more than 250 exclusive videos covering every era of history by pressing the join button under the video or the links in the description and pinned comment.
Gregory's account of the reasons behind Clovis's baptism is legendary in character. Yet, the fact remains that the Frankish king did turn towards Christianity at the turn of the 5th to the 6th century, and that the conflict between the young Germanic kingdoms on Gallic soil played a role in his decision. The actual historical events, of course, were far more complex than a quick reading of Gregory suggests, even though he is our only primary witness to these developments, alongside a few other sources. Thus, to get the full picture, we must take a wider view of the era in which he lived, an era dominated by the Germanic tribes that brought about the fall of Rome within that same generation. Let's begin with a historical index of the events and background to Clovis's baptism, an event whose exact year cannot be determined with certainty, and, aside from Gregory of Tours, is poorly attested in the historical record. Amid the turmoil of the 5th century and the collapse of the Western Roman Empire, the Franks had carved out their own sphere of power in the former Roman territory of northeastern Gaul along the Middle Rhine. The Roman province of Belgica Secunda, which was part of this Frankish-controlled region, was ruled from 481 or 482 onward by King Clovis. Like the other Frankish factions, King Clovis was only a minor player in late 5th century Gaul, compared to the other Germanic tribes occupying Roman territory, such as the Visigoths and Burgundians in other parts of Gaul, and the Ostrogoths in northern Italy. Yet Clovis's power grew immensely in 486, when he and his allies defeated the remnant realm of the Roman commander Syagrius near Soissons. Through this victory, Clovis likely brought large parts of what remained of the Roman army in northern Gaul under his control. Moreover, elements of the Roman administrative apparatus fell into his hands, including state-owned lands with tax revenues and agricultural estates, mints and arms factories. These assets elevated Clovis above the other Frankish warlords. After a period of consolidation, the pagan Alemanni were defeated and subjugated in 496, at the already mentioned Battle of Zülpich. In 507, the Visigothic king Alaric II of Toulouse was defeated, ending the recurring conflicts between the Franks and the Visigoths. After this, most of Gaul fell under Clovis's rule. Thereafter, the Burgundians were repeatedly attacked by the Franks. The greatest powers in Gaul had been overcome, and the Franks would be the dominant political and military force in Gaul and beyond for centuries to come. These developments, however, were not the result of savage Germanic tribes overrunning Roman territory and then tripping over themselves to seize the largest chunks of land, as outdated narratives once claimed. Frankish warlords like Clovis and other Germanic leaders saw themselves as legitimate representatives of the Roman imperial order. Yet the world in which they moved had changed dramatically since the abdication of the last Western Roman emperor in 476, and Gaul had become a post-imperial space. This meant that the imperial centre no longer exercised control over the region and, in practice, ceased to exist as the guarantor of the imperial framework. Even so, the groups and actors operating within this post-imperial space continued to use the empire's political language, symbols, offices, and concepts to legitimize and stabilize their authority. Thus, the rulers of the emerging kingdoms on former Roman soil presented themselves as continuations of Roman government. They sought to maintain this framework of an imperial image, which was necessary because the Germanic groups often represented only a small military elite, numbering in the thousands, ruling over the much larger population of Romanized natives, who numbered in the hundreds of thousands to millions, alongside Roman titles and martial symbolism. Another crucial element of post-imperial political language had survived the empire's fall: the Christian faith and the institution of the Church. Through his Catholic baptism, Clovis officially and visibly entered this political system of post-imperial Gaul, which was shaped especially by the Catholic Roman Church. Alongside many other Franks, Clovis had grown up in a Christian environment and was integrated into it. A letter from Archbishop Remigius of Rheims confirms this. Though undated, it likely dates to the early years of Clovis's rule in Belgica Secunda. Remigius advises Clovis to heed the counsel of his bishops and treat them with honor, claiming that if he acted in cooperation with them and according to their counsel, both he and his land would prosper. The bishops listed Christian virtues that the Frankish king ought to follow, such as caring for widows and orphans, ransoming captives, and securing the favor of the Christian God. In his writings, Remigius appears to address Clovis as a fellow Christian, rather than as a pagan. We may conclude that even before his conversion to Christianity, Clovis was familiar with the structures of post-imperial Gaul and recognized the bishops' political role within it. The bishops were among the most important agents of power in post-imperial Gaul. Over the course of the 5th century, bishops had grown beyond their role as spiritual leaders of their communities. The civitas, the city, was the seat of a bishop and his diocese, but also a secular administrative unit. Territorially speaking, it encompassed the city itself and its surrounding countryside. As the secular governmental institutions of the Roman state declined after the fall of the empire, bishops assumed various public functions: feeding the poor, organizing building projects, administering justice, policing the morality of the citizens, representing the city politically, and even overseeing its defenses. Furthermore, bishops became wealthy landowners thanks to substantial donations, with ecclesiastical properties tied to the office itself. Each city and its bishop were subordinate to a metropolitan, a title perhaps better known as an archbishop. Metropolitans and their bishops met regularly in synods to resolve religious and secular issues. Thus, even after the Roman government had withdrawn, a functioning administrative and organizational structure survived through the Roman Church. As state authority weakened, bishops became the local power holders within this remaining Roman system. Many bishops came from the senatorial aristocracy of the provincial elite, and different aristocratic families competed for control of their cities. Sometimes, dynastic episcopal families emerged, in which sons succeeded fathers in the office of bishop. For many members of the Roman provincial senatorial elite, the episcopal office offered a new career after a period of decline for this group during the 3rd and 4th centuries. The Christianization of the empire had fostered this development, making the bishopric the culmination of a successful worldly career. Many bishops had previously served as military, court, or civil officials, possessing corresponding qualifications and prestige. Even the role of archdeacon as the administrator of a bishop's estates could serve as a stepping stone to the episcopate. Despite the empire's fall, the church and its diocesan structure preserved key elements of Roman governance and its ruling elite. For a new ruler, like Clovis, conversion created an opportunity to connect to the conquering Frankish military elite of the Gallo-Roman population they ruled. However, conversion to Catholicism was not Clovis's only option. Many other Germanic groups, like the Goths, Vandals, and Burgundians, had accepted Christianity earlier than the Franks, often even before entering the Roman world proper. However, they did not convert to Roman Catholicism. Instead, they adhered to Arianism, a sect of Christianity founded by the North African priest Arius during the time of Emperor Constantine the Great, and was considered heretical by the Roman Catholics, who made up the majority of the Gallo-Roman population. Even Clovis's political allies were Arians, such as the Ostrogothic king Theodoric the Great or the Burgundian king Gundobad. Clovis's own sister, Audefleda, adopted Arianism when she married Theodoric. Some scholars have suggested that Clovis may initially have considered the Arian faith. A letter from Bishop Avitus of Vienne, congratulating Clovis on his baptism, mentions influential Arian Christians at the Frankish court, and therefore hints in this direction. The doctrinal differences between Catholicism and Arianism centered on the nature of Christ. In Catholic doctrine, Christ is one in being with God the Father and the Holy Spirit. In Arianism, Christ is a divine being, but not of the same essence as God. Per Arian belief, the Son, Jesus, is created by God and therefore subordinate to him. For many years, this theological difference was considered a major explanation for why the Franks, unlike the Goths or Burgundians, could successfully establish themselves as heirs to the Roman Empire. By converting to Catholicism, they connected themselves to the Gallo-Roman majority population and created a shared point of identity. Even though Arian and Catholic worship did not differ in practice, the two groups still attended separate churches and thus remained separated in religious life. Modern scholarship, however, nuances this view a bit, postulating that the division between Arian conquerors and Catholic conquered was real but not absolute. Among the Burgundians, for instance, many elites eventually turned to Catholicism. Accusations that Arian rulers, like the Visigothic king Euric, hindered Catholics by failing to appoint new bishops likely reflect political rather than religious motivations, as Catholic bishops like Sidonius Apollinaris had staunchly resisted the Visigothic conquest. As of the 6th century, Visigothic kings of Arian extraction were repeatedly convening Christian synods without Catholic bishops objecting. Even so, Clovis's baptism altered the political landscape. According to Bishop Avitus's letter, a messenger and a letter from Clovis had informed the bishop of the king's decision and invited him to the baptism. If Avitus received such an invitation, other bishops, especially those in Frankish territory, must have been invited as well. But Avitus was Bishop of Vienne, a city in the Burgundian kingdom that was ruled by an Arian king. Thus, Clovis was effectively appealing across political boundaries to the Catholic bishops of Arian-ruled lands. One can therefore argue that Avitus was not the only bishop of the neighboring kingdoms with Arian rulers who received such an invitation. In choosing Catholicism, Clovis publicly broke with the religious alignment of the other Germanic kings. By inviting Catholic bishops living under Arian rule, he signaled to the powerful Romanized subjects of Germanic Arian kings that a legitimate Catholic alternative now existed. To make matters worse for the Visigoths and Burgundians, the Catholic Frankish king could involve himself in the affairs of Catholic subjects in neighboring realms, regardless of political borders. This sowed distrust between Arian rulers and their Catholic populations, who might now look to Clovis as their potential protector. Furthermore, as we have seen, the ecclesiastical provinces followed old Roman administrative lines. When archbishops travelled to their diocese, they crossed the new political borders of the Germanic kingdoms. This may have allowed bishops from Frankish territories to promote their new Catholic king in Arian lands. As Clovis was repeatedly at odds with the Visigoths in the 490s, a Catholic king attacking Arian Visigoths might find Catholic support in Aquitaine and southern Gaul, an advantage he would not enjoy if he entered into these wars as a pagan. Though the poor source situation leaves certainty in doubt, 2 successive bishops of Tours, then under Visigothic control, were suspected of seeking to surrender the city to Clovis and were exiled, lending some credibility to this argument. Bishop Avitus ultimately declined the invitation, fearing the provocation of his Arian king. His letter mainly excuses his absence, but also predicts military success for Clovis. Just as the hair worn beneath the war helmet is now anointed with holy oil, just as the armor has been set aside and the spotless limbs shine in the spotless white of baptismal robes, may this soft garment, as you, most flourishing of kings, believe, cause the hard weapons to serve you all the more powerfully hereafter. And may holiness increase what fortune has already granted. This may be merely polite, late antique Christian rhetoric, appealing to a military man like Clovis, since Avitus himself was cautious about military matters and did not agitate for a holy war against the Arians. However, Avitus's carefully worded correspondence hints that some southern bishops might indeed have preferred Catholic rule. Thus, Clovis's turn to Catholicism gave him 2 major advantages. It softened the divide between conquerors and conquered, and it destabilized Arian rule over neighboring kingdoms by giving their Catholic subjects a new political and religious alternative. As noted earlier, not only Clovis, but also parts of the Frankish elite adopted the Catholic creed. These men belonged to a warrior society, whose political language was shaped by notions of honor, retaliation, competition, and martial achievement. It's difficult to imagine that a carpenter's son from distant Galilee, who instructed his followers to turn the other cheek, would appeal to such a warrior culture. Yet, in the 5th and 6th centuries, gravestones and martial artifacts depict Christ as a warrior who conquered death and defeated the devil. A Frankish gravestone from Niederdollendorf shows, on one side, a Frankish warrior with a seax, a comb, a beard, boots, and a flask. The reverse shows a stylized Jesus with a halo holding a spear while standing triumphant over a serpentine creature. A belt buckle, found in 1971 and dated to the mid-6th century, depicts a bearded man with an axe and spear riding a horse with an erect phallus. Above the horse's head appear the letters Alpha and Omega. The inscription and crosses identify the rider as Jesus. Thus, even in this early phase of Frankish rule, the Christian faith offered warriors an identity compatible with their cultural values, integrating them into the new Christian order. It certainly took some time for most Franks to convert to their lord's new faith, but there were plenty of points of contact. Many Franks had served in the Roman military before the fall of the empire, and were familiar with Christianity as a religion that brought victory and military prowess. Gregory of Tours also tells us that Clovis gave his warrior elite time to adapt to the new conditions. The story of his wife, Chrodochilde, is cited as an example of this. According to Gregory, she wanted to have the first son she had with Clovis baptized. The child died, which the king attributed to the failure and powerlessness of the Christian God. The second son was also baptized, fell ill, and was only healed through the intercession of his mother and God's intervention. Nevertheless, Clovis held fast to his old faith. It is a beautiful story, as it illustrates Clovis's position. As patriarch with absolute control over his own family, he did not have to have his children baptized, but he did so anyway without converting himself. This signaled the impending change to the elite and gave them the opportunity to consider this step themselves, or to present the king with the conditions under which they would follow him in his decision. As we have seen, the conversion of the Franks under King Clovis was shaped by both spiritual and political considerations. In a pre-modern world where faith and politics were inseparable, such developments are understandable. Clovis was likely guided by two main ideas. Converting to Catholicism would help him consolidate his rule by creating a bond between the Frankish conquerors and the Gallo-Roman population. Bishops, who had become key power holders in many regions of Gaul, were crucial to this strategy. His conversion allowed him to reshape the political landscape. A legitimate Catholic king now existed in contrast to Arian rulers of the Burgundian and Visigothic kingdoms, offering the Catholic subjects of those realms an alternative that harked back to the Roman past and unity. Whatever ultimately motivated Clovis to adopt the Catholic faith, his decision laid the foundation for a Frankish realm rooted in Latin Christian culture, a culture that would shape much of Europe for centuries. We will explore how the Franks established the building blocks of the medieval world as this series continues. So make sure you're subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see them. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing. It helps immensely. Our patrons and YouTube members can watch more than 200 exclusive videos. Join their ranks via the link in the description or by pressing the join button under the video. To watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we'll catch you on the next one.